Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there, this is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franzi Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franzi Show. A behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franzi.
Well, hello, and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franzi, and this is your backstage pass to the music industry. This week, we get to talk with the founding member of Lez Zeppelin. We get to talk with Steph Paynes. We'll talk to her about the inspiration behind the band itself, what it was like working with the legendary Eddie Kramer, and we'll talk to her about what it was like performing in front of Jimmy Page himself. Now, Steph, she is not only an amazing guitarist, but she's an amazing person, and I can't wait to talk with her tonight. So if you would like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jfranzi.com. Now, let's get started. Steph, my friend, how are you?
I'm very well, Jay. Thank you for having me. All the way across the pond.
Across the pond. It is my pleasure. It is an absolute pleasure of mine to have you here. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes.
Could you do me a favor, take us back to 2004 in New York and tell me the inspiration behind your band?
I can't believe we've actually been doing this for 20 years. It's kind of amazing. It really started as a very self-indulgent little whim of an idea that I had, which is basically to just indulge, I guess, or try to make real my little fantasy of playing in a band that I thought would be the most fun to play in the whole world, and that would be Led Zeppelin, particularly as a guitar player. So I just simply was into the music about 6,000% and wanted to just play it and have fun with it. And I thought, why not put together an all-girl band, because that seemed a bit more novel. And also, to me, it might have been an idea to make it more powerful, because the only other all-girl band I'd been in was the most powerful rock band I'd ever been in. So it seemed natural to find a bunch of gals to play this. And miraculously, I did. And it seemed the more people I told this idea to, the more I realized how much everyone was super excited to see something like this. And lo and behold, here we are, 20 years later.
20 years later. That is a hell of an accomplishment, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. I will take it, yes.
What was it like at the beginning? How accepted was the band at the time?
You know, it was one of those things where I knew that there was an excitement around seeing such a thing, because there just were not any bands like this. I mean, there were a few what they called tribute bands that were all female, but nobody was playing Led Zeppelin. I mean, as far as I knew, I didn't know what a tribute band was. So as far as I was concerned, I was not starting a tribute band. Some people tried to tell me later that this is what this was, but I still maintain that this is not a tribute band, and we could go into that. So I knew there was excitement, but I also realized pretty fast that playing this music was a formidable undertaking. And I took it seriously. One, because I'm a musician, and I have that sensibility. I played jazz for a long time. I mean, I was serious about doing it the right way. But two, because it was such a well-known canon of music that people were, wedded to, that it was almost mythological in stature. So it was sort of daunting. 3, it was hard to play correctly. I mean, to have 4 virtuoso musicians, which is what you need to play this music properly, was like a near impossible quest. And then lastly, I just didn't know whether diehard Led Zeppelins would really get into it, would really accept us. We were all girls. We were messing with their Bible, It's like, so there were a lot of uncertainties, including whether the guys in Led Zeppelin, if they ever caught wind of it, would like it or try to shut me down. I mean, there were so many things at work, but being stubborn and being excited about it, I forged on. And when we finally hit the stage after 3 months of rehearsal, because, I didn't want to go out there without being well rehearsed, without being ready. And partially that was because we were women, okay? And I knew that we would be met by skepticism as it was to begin with. And I was not going to contribute to any kind of myth that women could not play as well as men, full well knowing that we had to play twice as well to be even considered any good.
Well, you mentioned a couple things in there I want to touch on. Let's start with being women. You said that you were afraid of how people would take it. So how was it received when you finally hit the stage?
So, as I suspected, most of our initial audiences were completely and utterly skeptical that we could pull it off. They were drawn to the amazing name of the band, Lez Zeppelin, for many reasons. They wondered, are they really? And, will they kiss each other on stage? And what the hell is this, So that was very clever and encouraging and useful. But once they got into the room, they thought they were going to see some sort of circus act, or they thought it might be at least kitsch or fun. We could see from the stage, the front rows, of jaws dropping. Like, what? Are you serious? Like, it was like we hit them with such power and intensity and passion that people just didn't know what happened to them. If they had come in skeptical, they certainly didn't leave that way. They left overwhelmed, which is why we're doing it for 20 years down the line.
Which, again, is amazing. But you mentioned, again, the fact that you were wondering what the band would think when you had an opportunity to meet them. But before we get there, I also noticed you were produced by Eddie Kramer, which is a legendary producer, engineer that had worked with Zeppelin in the beginning. What was it like, and how did you make that connection?
So once we started, things rolled very quickly for us, and soon we had an agent, and soon, a manager, and all this sort of thing started happening. And our audiences were bigger and bigger, and radio stations were interviewing us, and it was just this incredible and strange dive into, basically what was becoming a very successful band. So as we were playing Led Zeppelin, and, the whole thing was a fantasy to begin with. So why not just take it as far as you could go? And I used to joke with the girls, hey, maybe we'll get Eddie Kramer to come, and wouldn't that be amazing? And it was ha, 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 or we'll play Madison Square Garden, Both of these things happened. So at any rate, when we had this manager and came on board, and we decided to make a record, and of songs by Led Zeppelin and our rendition of them, and we thought people will dig that. Why not? It's different. So there were a couple of people that were interested in producing the band, And I said to our manager, and some of them were well known, but I said to Alan, who was our manager, I said, what about Eddie Kramer? Should we get him in the mix? And he was like, I don't know, I don't know what he's doing. I guess we could ask him. I said, well, it couldn't hurt to ask. So Alan reached out, and the next thing you know, I'm sitting in my office with my guitar, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's like, hello, it's Eddie Kramer. Is Steph there? And I literally nearly fell on the floor, but there he was, and he wanted to do it. He checked out the band. He thought we were capable of it. He wouldn't have done it unless he thought we could play it, up to par. It had to be played for him to have anything to do with it. And the next thing you know, he was producing our record. We flew him to New York, and we spent a couple weeks in lots of different studios. We did a lot of basic tracks at Electric Lady.
I love that place.
Where, of course, was the house that Eddie built for Jimi Hendrix.
Yep.
So why not start there? So that was pretty incredible. And then we just, we were mixing and doing leads in various different places, but it was quite an experience. I don't know how familiar deep you are into Led Zeppelin, but on Physical Graffiti, toward the end, there's this song called Black Country Woman.
Oh, yeah.
And it was recorded at Headley Grange with a mobile studio. And obviously the boys were sitting outside or something playing the song. And you hear Eddie's voice, and we joke about this, right? Eddie's voice coming in, should I get that airplane off? Because there was an airplane overhead. Right. And Robert, famously squawks back, nah, leave it, right? Says, it's Robert, leave it, right? So we were joking about this all the time. And so Eddie was, well, so then you'd hear rolling or whatever. And we were hearing that voice telling us rolling, it was just, it was crazy. It's like we were in some sort of strange Zeppelin vortex. And that's how it's been. I got to tell you. Vortex of magic.
You mentioned that album, and that was the very first album, an actual LP that I ever owned. And I played it to death. So I'm very familiar with the album.
That's awesome.
It was very awesome. Introduced by a neighbor, Paul Costa, if you're ever listening, neighbor growing up. He's the one who introduced me to Led Zeppelin.
Yay, Paul.
I actually met Eddie Kramer. I brought him. I was a teacher at the engineering college in Nashville, and I brought Eddie Kramer into the school, and he was speaking to the students. And one of the students mentioned while he was there saying, I did my project just the same way that you would have recorded a record, and I used one microphone on the drum kit, and he was describing how he did it, and he went through all this stuff. And then Eddie said to him, he goes, I used one microphone at the time because that's all we could do. He goes, but if I could go back and do it now, I'd have 12 or so microphones on the drum kit like everybody else does, and I would experiment just the same way, which was crazy for him to admit that and say that. But I know when you had the opportunity to record your album with him, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he go back and use and record it the same way that he did the original?
Well, yes and no. I think that there were some things he did that, at least an approach, that was the same. But he was all about getting an updated sound to the record. I mean, I think that was part of the idea, was to approach this music in an environment where you could record it in a higher fidelity, as it were, than they had access to. So wouldn't it be nice to hear how it sounded in that way? Having said that, his sensibility and his general approach was still Eddie Kramer. I mean, we had the left and right, but he's famous for throwing things in the left and right speakers back and forth. He did it with Hendrix. He did it with Zeppelin. He had a great time with Whole Lotta Love, which we recorded, and you could hear that same swirling around. So there were lots of Kramer-esque things in there. But at the same time, we were also experimenting as if we were starting anew. Like, for example, with guitar amps, and we tried lots of them. He brought in this new Jimi Hendrix Marshall that he had just got for free or something. And it sounded great, but it was the wrong sound. I mean, it was just not the right sound. So we didn't use that. And for solos, we did it in some other studio. We tried all of these little amps, including the Supros that Jimmy supposedly used. And it just, that particular Supro that we had was not sounding the way we wanted. So we found this weird little amp that was tucked away, because the studio had a lot of vintage stuff. And it was called a Vox Nova. It was about, small, almost like a practice amp size. And I think it had this knob on the top that said brass, and one that's it was very strange. Maybe it was for brass instruments, but I plugged into this thing and turned it up full throttle, and it just sounded amazing. And I think I recorded every solo with that amp, that little crazy amp. And, and that's the way it was, and that's the way we approached it. It felt right. It sounded right with the alchemy of gear that was there. And so we went with it. But I will tell you this, the scariest day that I had, maybe in all of my recording life anywhere, that morning when we were ready for guitar solo day, and I had to go in alone with Eddie Kramer and play guitar solos, play Jimmy's guitar solos, okay, with Eddie Kramer, who sat next to Jimi Hendrix, my first Jimmy idol, and Jimmy Page and all the rest of them. And I had to then go play them. And I got to tell you, I was nauseous. I thought, what have I done? This is the stupidest thing I've ever done, ever. And I just had to drag my ass in there and do it.
I couldn't imagine.
I did it.
So you talk about the feeling of going into the studio and playing Jimmy's solos in front of Eddie Kramer. At what point, if any, did you finally sit back and relax and enjoy the moment?
Great question. No one ever asked me that before. Okay, so luckily it was pretty soon. I went in, nervous wreck, and we started with Communication Breakdown, which, it's pretty fast solo, but it's one of the solos that I pretty much played stock. I play a lot of Jimmy's solos kind of note for note, but there are some that I don't, because I feel like it's just not, it's not anything he would have done. And we're mostly a live band. And I feel like to really reach the height in a moment, you have to kind of improvise. And especially with the blues numbers, it's like, I don't know how you can go in and just play the same blues solo that he played, right? That's just my personal opinion. But at any rate, you take things from it, but then you hope it launches you. So we started with Communication Breakdown. And, I plugged in, and he rolled the tape. And I just, took a deep breath, and I just played the solo, right? Just got through it. Bam. And after it was done, stopped the tape. I hear him, come in and listen. I think you just nailed it. I'm like, you want me to listen now? He's like, yep, I think that's it. And I said, don't you want me to do it again? Like on another track or something?
Right.
No. So I go in, and he says, I got to tell you something. I wasn't sure you could do this, he says to me. He goes, and now I'm sure you can. That was perfect. That was great. Let's move on. So after the first, he told me, he was worried. I was worried. Suddenly, he was no longer worried. It was clear I could do this. Let's just rip through him. then I enjoyed it. Then I was having a great time. And I think we did most of them, if not all. I may have took him to task on Since I've Been Loving You, that was the tour de force, man. That was the hard one. That was my own personal bar of like brilliance, and how could I even get close to that? Because I think, and I was taking from Jimmy's live, the Long Beach 72 version that came out on How the West Was Won. That version of Since is one of the most brilliant moments, I think, in Led Zeppelin, period. The way they play together like that on that take, in that concert, on that song. So that's kind of the version were learning, and I studied that version. So I was trying to get to that beautiful, passionate intensity and the arc of that solo, but that was the tough one.
Well, when he tells you that, that's got to be an amazing feeling.
Yeah. I'm glad he told me after the first. Thank God it was after the first. If we had struggled with that first number, I don't know. I might have, being in the studio is such a head game. You gotta be there, and you can be there, and then you cannot be there. And sometimes you just have to go home and come back the next day. But I didn't have that luxury of too many days to come back. So thank God, I was able to start off on that foot. Yeah, it was great.
That is absolutely amazing. One more piece before we leave that topic. You mentioned there's times where you decided to go off on your own and improv a little bit. And I know, especially in blues, that's what people do. But does that go back to your initial comment about not wanting to call this a tribute band and be a band of your own?
Yes, definitely. No question. I mean, I think, it's ballsy enough to play this music. It's super extra ballsy, like 3 pair instead of 1, to actually go out there. And basically what we do is what my fantasy was try to be Led Zeppelin. And by that, I don't mean impersonate them. Okay. I mean, actually being the band that they were. That's what turned me on. I wanted to be in that band. And being in that band means that you're playing with your drummer, man, and you're playing with it, and everyone's playing together in this incredible way of listening and communicating musically and having a sort of sixth sense about what the drummer's going to do or what the singer is going to do, and being able to play with that. That's where it's at. That's like, maybe because I grew up as a jazz musician, that to me was always where it was at. That's what interested me. That's what still interests me. And we use this music of Led Zeppelin as our canon, like you would use a great classical piece, Beethoven or something. But you bring yourself to it, and you bring your band to it. And when we play our shows, that is what we do. That is the spirit of it. I got to tell you, I have never seen another quote unquote tribute band, as it were, do that. Because it's, quite frankly, near impossible. I mean, it's like, it's the most crazy thing. I'm going to get out there, and like Jimmy, I'm going to just start taking it out. I'm not taking it out the way he did, exactly. I'm just going to be Steph, being Jimmy, being Steph, or whatever it is. I don't even know what it is, And so this is really where the fun is. This is really where the spirit is. This is where the passion and intensity of that music is born. And I don't think you can capture anything real about Led Zeppelin unless you do that. And that's just my opinion. But I bet you $1 million that if Jimmy, or pounds rather, if Jimmy were sitting here next to me, he would agree 100%. I don't want to speak for him, Jimmy, if you're listening, but I do think that.
Well, my family is from New York, but I was born and raised in your rival city of Boston, where rock music was king. But Berklee College of Music was the center of our universe, which was jazz. So I can understand how those two things can come together and you can feel that way. And I think there's nothing better than when somebody is capable of playing note for note, but then chooses to go off and do something from themselves. In addition, you're still playing the foundation of the original, but then you go and play something additional to that to make it your own. I think that's what it's all about.
Correct. Yes.
And then that takes me to the next point. You just mentioned Jimmy. You actually had the opportunity to meet him and perform in front of him. So let's start with just how nervous were you?
Okay, so let's take Eddie Kramer land and multiply it by 100 or maybe 600, 6,000. I mean, because this, you see, this was the moment of truth for me. This was what I'd been waiting for ever since I started the band. And by that, I mean, I didn't know if I'd actually ever play in front of Jimmy or if he'd even notice who we were. Of course, I had a fantasy that he would. And, you know, I didn't know if he would think it was right. I didn't know. I mean, I had no idea what he would think of it. I could only know that, or at least believe that I was on the right path. Like, I just felt that I understood it because I was so deep into it that I just kind of understood the zeitgeist of what this band was about. Balls, I guess, but I believe that I knew that. I could feel it. All the evidence is there. It's in articles. All you have to do is listen to it. All you have to do is watch it or hear what they said about it to understand what is at the essence of this music, right? So basically, I kind of always held myself to that bar. So this is 10 years in now, in 2013, or 9 years in. And I wasn't sure he would come. I had met him previously, and we had got along very well. We really hit it off, and he knew all about the band. Once I was introduced to him, he was like, oh, of course, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he just knew all about it, which made me ecstatic. And he told me that he thought I was doing a stunning job out there playing this. Okay, so number one, I knew that he approved from the beginning. And when he came to see us, this was the moment. And I just remember he actually called me up that morning, which is the part of this whole story. And, that was crazy enough. And then he said, I probably will come. I'm in the studio. He was in the studio working on all of those 3 album sets that were re-released.
Oh, yeah.
In this whole big packages, 1, 2, and 3, and then 4. Yeah, he was working on those. But he said, put me on the guest list under a different name, his friend's name, and I'll try to make it, And I said, come anytime. It's a long show, even if it's half. So and this was in London, and before we went on stage, we all looked at each other, and they all looked at me like, oh my God, Steph, like this is, And I said, look, I said to myself, I could do one of two things. I could completely fall apart, right? Which is reasonable, and probably 50% of the people, maybe 80, 90% of people would do. Just totally fall apart because Jimmy's going to be in the audience. Or I can do what I do every night, and that is play as if Jimmy Page is in the room. Because that is basically what I have been doing. Every night I play, and I wonder as if Jimmy is in the room, whether he would like what I did, or whether it be good enough, or what I play as if he's there. That is my bar. And I am my own worst critic. I mean, I could have standing ovation show, and if I think I didn't play some solo right, or it wasn't the top of my game, I won't be happy about it, right? So I play as if Jimmy's there. So I told myself, well, what difference does it make if he's really there or not? I mean, it's the same thing, right? I told myself this, right? So I just said to the band, let's just go out there. We're not taking prisoners, man. We're just leaving it all on the stage. We're just giving it everything we've got. And that's it. No holds barred, just everything we've got. So that's what we did. We just came roaring out and, we just played our guts out. And I think it was at some point during Dazed and Confused, of course, when I was doing the bow solo, of course, that, Jimmy walks in. And I learned later that they were, because they all leave the stage. And I learned later that they all saw him at the back of the room with his, beautiful white hair and stuff. He was at the bar. And they all were like, don't tell Steph. He's here. Don't tell Steph, And I'm up there doing a bow solo. I mean, it's a good thing I didn't know. But at some point after that, I did see him at the back. And we just played like crazy. And the audience went nuts. They went nuts. I mean, and we were like, big ending with slams and drums. And, we just were intense. And after the show, he just beelined for the dressing room. Beelined. And they let him in and the door was shut and that was it. No one else was coming back there. I have to tell you, I was on Mars somewhere. I was so spent emotionally. I almost couldn't speak. I couldn't speak. I was just finished. I was just completely finished. I can't even explain. So it took me a while. I don't know if I even talked to I think I just was like dumbfounded. But he basically said to all of us, that's the way it should be done. Each and every one of you was brilliant, stunning. That is how it should be played. That's how it should be done.
That's amazing.
What can I tell you? Dream come true.
It is a dream come true for sure.
Yep. And he stayed with us for like an hour or and a half. He just didn't leave. He talked to us for hung out. We gave him T-shirts. I mean, he just thought it was amazing. He thought our drummer was closer to Bonham than, names I won't mention. Anyway, I'm just saying it was a incredible experience. And I'm not even sure afterwards the bass player Megan and I went to our hotel room and we just stared at each other. And she looked at me and she goes, now what? I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, what's the next
We
goal?
didn't even know where to go from there. It was nuts. I have no idea.
Let me ask you. So a lot of times when something like that happens, in the heat of the moment, you're so into it and you're nervous, you're playing, you're performing, you're channeling the performance. Did you get a chance to enjoy the moment?
I would say that I enjoyed it to a certain extent, but there was such expectation that I had that I wish I didn't have in that moment. Because when you have expectations, there's no way, this is a very hard lesson to learn, and it's taken me my whole life so far to learn it. But expectations will do you no good at all, because nothing ever meets your expectations. And by that, I mean, it might be better, it might be worse, it might be left of it or right of it, but it's not going to be what you expect. And when things are not what you expect, you tend to crash. So I had all these expectations, and they were present during that show, and they were present after the show. So even though the show was a brilliant success, I don't know what I expected. It was not the most, I can't say it was the most enjoyable moment for me or the most enjoyable concert. It was one of the most memorable, and it was one of the most incredible. And what happened that night was beyond my expectations, right? In some ways. But it was a difficult concert to perform because of that. I won't lie. I mean, I didn't just lose myself in my musical self and be like, yay, blah, blah, so what's Jimmy's here. This is great. This is fun. I mean, it's like not quite, but we did enjoy the performance, and we gave a great performance.
What was the feeling of relief like when the curtain closed?
It was, I was almost stunned. I don't know if I was relieved exactly. I was just sort of bewildered, I think. I mean, people went nuts. The audience screamed. So that was good. Thank God, That's great, as it always is. But I think I was just I was in some sort of psychotic state of mind. I don't know. It was all a little too much for me. And believe me, I can handle a lot. I'm telling you, I'm a warrior. I can handle a lot. I have handled a lot, but that was a lot. And then some, even more than I was almost capable of handling. So I think, because this was everything to me. I was Jimmy, like I was occupying that sort of artistic space that I felt was Jimified, and for lack of something else. And so with him actually being in the room, there was some sort of, maybe we would spontaneously combust or something. I don't know. It was weird. There was something a little weird about it. And afterwards, he stayed so late that it was just me and him in the club, closing down the club, And then there was that was weird. I mean, it was almost like, I think we were scared of each other or something. It was very strange. Like one thing he said, which I'll never, this was amazing to me. He said to me, he goes, it was so sexual. And I looked at him and I was like, well, yeah, yes, I was stunned that he didn't he was almost shocked by that. And I just felt like, wow, we had sort of channeled the essence of Led Zeppelin so that he was almost shocked by how sexualized it was. And Led Zeppelin to me is very sexual, but maybe he didn't even realize it until he saw us do it. You know what I mean? It was like this strange thing. It was just weird and amazing. But I'm glad he picked up on that.
Nice. It would be bad if he didn't, right? I am sure that bond that you guys created that night is what has led to a lasting friendship, and it's got to be an amazing feeling to have a friend like that. So you get to do all this stuff, but you also get to play Madison Square Garden. What was that like?
Yeah, that was another sort of, so we played there twice. It was not headlining Madison Square Garden or anything. That would be the ultimate dream. I'm not going to give up on that yet. But we played the halftime show there. But we did it twice, and we were in Madison Square Garden, and we were in the dressing room, and that whole scene with Song Remains the Same where the limos pull up through that tunnel garage. I mean, we were standing there. I mean, the whole thing. So it was amazing. It was just, again, another sort of surreal moment. We were up there on the Jumbotron and all the rest. And it was particularly moving for me because it was on my father's birthday, and my father had just passed a month before. And, it was very bittersweet because of that, but it was also kind of beautiful. He was sort of there. And they did a memorial up on the Jumbotron. So it was just, we were so excited to just have this. And it was full. Madison Square Garden was full. So in essence, yeah, that's what we did. And it was just spectacular feeling.
I worked out of Nashville for 20 plus years, and I got to see the rise of Bonnaroo while I was in Nashville. Mm-hmm. So at what point was it that you got to play Bonnaroo?
Oh, that's an amazing story. Okay. How much time do we have? I'll try to be terse. Okay. So Bonnaroo, our agent at the time, Pat May, who's was with Skyline, and I think now agent's Billy Strings. He's his big agent. But he was sort of starting out at the time. So we kind of started out together. And he was amazing. But he had been trying to get us into festivals. And Bonnaroo was one. He kept trying. And, nobody puts bands like ours, whatever you want to call us, into big festivals like that. But what had happened, of course, was the Led Zeppelin reunion concert in 2007. Actually, I was just at the O2 last night, which is the first time I'd been there since attending the Led Zeppelin reunion concert in 2007. So this, I don't know if you remember, but it was this huge thing, and they were finally getting together, and tickets were going for tens of thousands of pounds, and it was nuts. And everyone thought they were going to go on tour after that. Okay? Everybody. Well, that was the rumor. So they never said they were going to go on tour. There was speculation. And then this rumor went out that Led Zeppelin were going to headline Bonnaroo. Now, the people at Bonnaroo did not quash the rumor so quickly because it was very good for them. Why not? Hey, this is free publicity, right? Eventually, no, they're not headlining Bonnaroo. And they're not going on tour. And that was it. It was a one-shot deal. So apparently, the Bonnaroo people thought, well, we're not going to get Led Zeppelin, but let's get some Zeppelin. Let's get Lez Zeppelin. Okay? So, bingo. They got us to play. We were over the moon. This is great. Okay. So now we're going to play Bonnaroo, right? We were all excited. So what happened with this was, you know how they announced the lineup? You can't tell anybody until they announce the lineup, which was this in February or something at some point. So I was waiting for midnight of the February, I forget the day, 7th or something, in my office for the announcement of the lineup, and hoping we'd get a little, wow, this is exciting. Now we can announce it. Well, what happened was amazing. Every news story that came out basically mentioned us like in the first paragraph, because they alluded to this thing that it was like, well, Led Zeppelin are not headlining Bonnaroo, but this band Lez Zeppelin from New York will be there, and Robert Plant was also playing with Alison Krauss. So lo and behold, I'm sitting there, and it was the most amazing story after story after story with us at the top, not all the way down at the bottom, also on the bill in some small. So this is great. And I'm over the moon about this. And I just can't even believe how lucky we are with this. And then about 2 hours in comes another story. I think it was from the Chicago Tribune. I was following it all on the internet, or the AP. And the story was Led Zeppelin headlining Bonnaroo. And I sit back in my chair. I look at this. And I'm like, what? And I read it again. Yes, Led Zeppelin. And I'm like, it's not April 1st. It's not April Fool's Day. Did somebody get this wrong? Somebody got it wrong. Believe it or not, somebody got it wrong. And it was somebody at AP, Associated Press, which, if you know what that means, Associated Press feeds hundreds of newspapers in the United States alone. It feeds everywhere, worldwide. Everyone picks up the AP wire, right? Well, guess what? Led Zeppelin were headlining Bonnaroo, according to AP. Guess what had happened the next day? The correction. The correction happened. Now, could anything better in the whole world? Could you buy publicity like this for $10 million? No, because the correction was worldwide. This became a story in and of itself. There was a mistake by a major news agency And Led Zeppelin is not going to headline Bonnaroo. It's a band from New York called Lez Zeppelin. Okay? On CNN. Our name scrolling across CNN. I mean, because they had to make the correction, and it was a story. Again, all of this publicity. So we walked into Bonnaroo with this incredible marketing force behind the band. And basically, we walked into Bonnaroo as a substitute for Led Zeppelin. Okay? That is what happened. We became the substitute for Led Zeppelin. Now, you want to talk about pressure. Why don't you add that to the list? So, okay. So, again, guess what? 10,000, 20,000, I don't even know. We come out of our trailer, okay? And we're basically now having to substitute for Led Zeppelin. And we look at it, and as we walk toward the stage, the lights go down on the stage. We hear this roar, okay? I'm telling you, Jay, a roar. And we looked at each other like, and I said to the girls, I said, you know what, guys? We basically are Led Zeppelin right now. We're kind of Led Zeppelin. I mean, and when we walked on that stage, there was this roar as if we were. And, you know, it was totally surreal. And there were thousands and thousands. It was a sea, the ocean, as Robert might say. And when there's that kind of reception, guess what? You play like you're Led Zeppelin. You effing do that. And we were on fire. We just played this show. That crowd went nuts. I was standing and doing Dazed and Confused. I was doing the bow solo. Every time I hit the bow and pointed it out, there was this like, you know, screams. I mean, probably more than like Jimmy even had. It was nuts. It was the most incredible show. And afterwards, we got back to the trailer. We were just stunned. You don't know what even happened. It was like some split in the time continuum or something. The guy who runs and owns Bonnaroo came back. He came to our trailer and he knocks on the door and he says, I have to just come in here and tell you, I thought this was going to be fun, like to have some Zeppelin thing. Goes, I was not expecting what I saw. I was not, you girls are unbelievable. It might as well have been Led Zeppelin. He goes, I can't even believe it. And I just had to shake your hand. It was amazing.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that for sure. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
I know
it was.
You mentioned Alison Krauss working with Robert Plant. Now, I had an opportunity to work in the studio with Alison Krauss. It was not with Robert Plant, but I had that opportunity. So when things like that happen, do you ever think of a possible collaboration with any of the guys from the band?
Well, my one remaining dream that's still on my bucket list is, of course, to play with Jimmy at some point, either on stage or do some music with him. Oh my God. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension, of course, but that is my remaining dream. So I figure, listen, maybe I'll manifest it sooner or later, you know, manage to manifest some of the other stuff. That would be incredible. And I know I've met John Paul Jones as well. I've met them all actually, but JPJ has said to me, you know, I met him at the O2 concert. Oh yeah, you knew all about it. I'd love to come see you girls. I've heard all about you. I'd love to come. I bet you if he were in the same town, he would come on stage and play with us because that's just who he is. He's the most magnificent musician, and he is a real musician. He plays with everybody. I mean, he'd love it. You know, so I know maybe that will happen. That would be amazing too. But of course, me being Jimmy's girl, you know, if I could just do those beautiful solo bits at the end of 10 Years Gone or at the end of In the Light with Jimmy, that I'd die happy. That'd be it.
That would be awesome. Well, you got Ludlow Garage coming up. That would be a great place for it. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, maybe you'll come to Ludlow Garage. Come on.
All right, my friend. Well,
Yeah.
we do this thing here we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody who's worked behind the scenes or somebody who may have supported you along the way. Do you have anybody you'd like to shine a little light on?
Oh my gosh. There's so many people. But I think I would have to shine the light most brightly just on my crew. Like, I would just have to thank Rob Janos, who is my, not only started as a longtime fan, then became guitar tech and is now road manager, guitar tech, my everything basically. So Mr. Janos, Rob Janos would be one. And the other guy who's been with us longer than anybody is Night Bob. I don't know if you know who Night Bob is. Bob Tchaikovsky. He's known as Night Bob, but he's a legendary sound engineer. And he's been with us for 13 years. I mean, we are blessed to have Night Bob, who's mixed Aerosmith, mixed Led Zeppelin, mixed everybody, knows I mean, you know, the stories he has regaled alone, but he's on our team, and I would have to shine the light on them. And then, of course, our longtime fans, or the people that come to see us and give us so much love, and we just love playing for them, with them. I mean, it's just never does it go unappreciated. And we have some real longtime fans. There are probably too many to mention. I don't want to do it because if I leave someone out, it will be a terrible faux pas. But you know who you are, and that would be, you know, top of my list.
A big thanks to Steph for taking the time to share her stories with us, and thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. As always, I really do appreciate it. If you know anyone that would enjoy this episode, please be sure to share it. You can do that and find the links to everything mentioned over at jfranzi.com/episode 105. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franzi Show. Make sure you visit us at jfranzi.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.